It's May the 8th, 2013. This is 508, a show about Worcester. I don't even want to do a show this week, Brendan.
No, should I leave?
I feel like everything in Worcester is going so terribly this week that us even doing a show is going to turn into some sort of horrible thing.
I'll do my best not to pick a fight with you.
I'll tell you something. Last Thursday was the last Thursday night music night at the Dive Bar.
Yes.
And we got a little bit of interview footage with those guys, which we're going to have later in the show. I honestly feel like that could maybe be the entire show because everything else in the Worcester this week is horrible.
Mm-hmm.
So this week in Worcester, this is a week in Worcester where the biggest news and the most scandalous news was not that the bishop was arrested for drunk driving. That's the kind of news it was. This week in Worcester, we have a guy who was...
But he was arrested for drunk driving.
He was arrested for drunk driving, but then he pled not guilty. This is a week where there's a guy in Worcester who's apparently planning to kidnap, rape, torture, and eat children.
Yes.
This is a week in Worcester where the body of the dead Boston Marathon bomber has been in the city for the last week. And as some have pointed out, this has created, I don't know, turned the city into some sort of like international, what would you describe it as?
I mean, for at least until things went crazy in Cleveland, it seemed like it had suddenly become the hub of international media.
We're not even going to talk about any other city because there's too much horrible stuff in Worcester.
There's too much terrible stuff to talk about. We can just focus on Worcester, yeah. But no, I mean, like the whole world, their eyes turned to us, and we were reminded once again that nobody in the world knows how to pronounce Worcester.
There you go. So this has been a week. So you know what? This is one of these things like, I don't know. There's certain sort of thought experiments where they sort of like present you with a scenario and ask you to guess on how likely it is, and your guess is pretty low, and then they give you a more specific version of the same scenario, and your guess goes up. So when somebody said, "Do you think that the body of the dead Boston Marathon bomber would ever end up in a funeral home in Worcester?" I would say unlikely. When you would say, "What if it was Peter Stefan involved?" you would say, "Well, sure, of course, if Peter was involved." So this is a week where Peter Stefan, saint, grouchy guy, funeral home director, sometime Worcester gadfly, like took it to the next level by saying this funeral home will deal with his body when no other funeral home will. This is also a week when Worcester gadfly Billy Bro also took his horribleness to the next level. And so like everybody's raising their game in the Worcester gadfly industry. I feel like again me and Brendan are doing nothing this week.
Not on that level. I would like to remind our viewers too that we've had a relatively long-standing policy of not speaking negatively about our local gadflies.
Yeah.
But I think this is one of those weeks where they have earned and deserved the due respect of being spoken about, possibly in a negative light.
Are you talking about Mr. Bro or people in general, gadflies in general?
Well, Mr. Bro, I think in general earned as much attention as he gets, and I think even he will be forced to acknowledge on a long enough timeline that this was the wrong kind of attention.
He has been basically having press conferences. They've been covered by huge amounts of cameras, possibly because he's incredibly photogenic.
And he actually went to Boston one day this week, Monday it was, actually drove himself out to Boston just because there were other news outlets that he had yet to hold press conferences with, and essentially jumped in front of their cameras at the Moakley Courthouse where they were staged because of the friends of the living Boston bomber were being arraigned on, or there was a hearing to see if they could be released on their own recognizance. So he had media staged out there. Billy just showed up to give his own press conference, completely unrelated to what they were covering, because he had felt as though the donations apparently were not flying in quickly enough for his local project here to fly a body without State Department approval overseas.
Because here's what I would say. At least he was doing something constructive with his frustration, which is he was saying, we need to get this body out of the city. We're going to raise money, and we're going to fly this thing overseas. I haven't seen any of the press talk to the donors to make sure that they knew which body they were paying to ship overseas. They may have thought it was him.
Very possible.
Which, but at least that's like a constructive use of his time. There was also a bunch of people...
To give Billy credit, though, I mean, I think that's actually the thing that, regardless of where you stand on the presence of this body, that I think that's actually everybody's desire was to get it out of the city. But I think for the majority of people, or at least the majority of sane people, was to get it out of the city so that we could do the respectful thing and just literally put it behind us by burying it.
Rather than using this as an excuse to hold a series of huge press conferences.
I think Billy was
over and over again.
I know last weekend was the big trebuchet contest over at Higgins Armory. in their parking lot. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Billy was actually offering cash rewards for anyone that would bring their trebuchet down to Boston Harbor, so he could just launch the body into the harbor.
I had no idea.
Yeah, no, I mean, he was looking for any opportunity just to get it out of into international waters or beyond.
It's incredible. Well, I would say again, like I admire the practicality of. If some of the aspects of this I don't like, appreciate the practicality of saying this is what I want and this is how I'm going to get it. There's also a lot of people out there protesting, basically calling for the desecration of this body or something else, or complaining that it was disrespectful for this body to be in the United States, as though there were not, I don't know how many, honestly, probably tens or hundreds of thousands of people worse than this Boston Marathon bomber buried in the United States.
So let's be honest. I mean, like, so everyone, just take a moment and think about every serial killer that's ever lived. Think about every person who's perpetrated a mass shooting. Everybody who's assassinated a president. We've actually
an entire generation of people who like raped and killed hundreds of Indians over their lifetime.
Yeah, and we have actually buried all of those people. In many cases, now, and to be fair, in many cases, bodies end up being cremated, and families make that decision for the simple practical reason that they don't want to create something that could be a memorial to atrocity.
Yeah.
But in this particular case, we're dealing with religious sensitivities that you can't ethically ignore. So, but yeah, I mean, it strikes me as odd that people seem to be surprised that we would actually that there would actually be a funeral for somebody who's dead.
Right, because they are dead.
They are in fact dead. Now that was confirmed by multiple parties, and my understanding was always that when somebody dies, if I'm not mistaken, it's actually in Chapter 114 of the Mass General Law that you do in fact have to dispose of a body properly in a reasonable amount of time in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I just assumed that was something we didn't take for granted.
Well, I just want to say, I want to speak to the people who are advocating for the desecration of a corpse here, as though this will achieve some sort of justice. That if we could increase the amount of justice in the world by desecrating a corpse, this would be a lot easier world to live in.
Yes.
You know, but I don't think it works that way.
No, I mean, think of how much better the world would be just from biology being practiced at the high school level, right? All of those frogs being desecrated.
They would be
the
contributing to such justice being generated.
We would have such a just world that nobody would know what to do with themselves. We wouldn't have a show to do.
It would be incredible. I want to say, so there was a bunch of protesters there on Friday. I guess that was the peak of the protesters against the funeral home and for the desecration of a corpse, etc. And other. I'm calling that sentiment out. But there's also other complaints going on in that protest. The Telegram Gazette mentioned that there were 100 people there. I've seen the videos that I've seen. Looks like there was about 50 people protesting. Based on having counted protesters yesterday on that same strip of street, I'm going to say 50 people protesting. I saw at least one Facebook message from somebody saying, there's a photo of me on the Telegram website saying that I'm protesting this. I was on my way to work. Like, there are a ton of people in Maine South, and when you get 50 people protesting something, you're going to get another 50 people at least, especially when you have if you have the international media at the corner of May and Maine, you're going to get some people standing around.
Based only on the tab for detail work that the city seems to want Mr. Stefan to pick up, I would have to assume the other 50 people were all sworn law enforcement.
Well, this is the other angle, but I just want to complain about demonstration ins and outs first, which is that I haven't seen a concrete number from any news source of the number of demonstrators, even at GAS, which is frustrating. We had 43 people out there confirmed yesterday protesting in favor of the burial of corpses. I would say that the general sentiment of that group, and this is a breaking story, this body may have been buried by the time you see this video. This is a developing story, I guess. Basically saying, like, if we needed to bury this body in the United States, that would be fine to bury this body in the United States. That would not be the worst thing in the world. Okay.
So the worst thing that we've done in the United States?
All I know is we had 43 people out for that. I don't see any international. There was no international news coverage of that. And you know why?
Anderson Cooper nowhere to be found.
It's not inflammatory enough.
Yeah.
I was glad to be part of it. I feel like it has been a horrible, insane week in the city of Worcester. I wanted to just stand up and say there is some sanity in Worcester. Some people in Worcester.
Hard as it may be defined.
Some people in Worcester are jackasses. All of us are jackasses some of the time.
Yes.
But not all of us in Worcester are jackasses all of the time. This is my humble message to you, the viewer. Police details, Brendan.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't even know what to make of that. It sounds as though that what they're pegging it around $10,000 a day.
Yes.
For police details. Which
so this may be $100,000 of police.
It's a really
time.
expensive experiment in how to dispose of a body in 2013.
And let me just say that, except for I walk by that corner, because that corner is not too far from my neighborhood. like, I guess my timing has been bad, because except when I was there demonstrating, I haven't seen any demonstrators. All I've seen are police and sad looking cameramen.
Wondering why they're stuck in a city that they can't pronounce the name.
I don't know. I feel like couldn't you just have one policeman there, and if a demonstration forms, pull a couple over from somewhere else?
I am in absolutely no position to second guess the.
Couldn't you have a webcam? Couldn't you just have some kind of an app? Isn't there some app someone could have on their phone that would just call the police if there was a problem?
You would think we would have figured out a way for C-Click-Fix to have figured this one out by now. Yeah, no, I mean, I don't want to second guess, the accounting abilities of the chief of police. I mean, sure, his numbers are solid, but I think the bigger argument is, do we actually want to have the city put in a position where it's charging businesses simply for doing the business that they are chartered to do?
Yeah.
That seems like an odd place. I mean, to go. There are certain examples of where I think that makes sense. If you have bars that have been problematic in the past and they want to pay for a police officer to be on site. But I mean, it sounds like this is more the police department forced themselves, or the city forced themselves on a business that is just doing its business. And
right.
I don't necessarily think that entitles them to say he owes them for that.
No, this is the kind of thing, I mean, this is obviously the chief of police's call. I would like to see a little, I don't know, I would just like to I feel like a lot of people have been questioning, like, is this a disproportionately huge and expensive police presence? Like, this is the kind of thing that pretty much only the council would.
Well, how many protesters did you say you saw there at the most?
I never was there when there was a protester. Yesterday, when I was there, I talked to a reporter who will remain nameless, and he said he'd been most of the day. He had seen at one point 2 protesters.
Okay, so how many police officers did you see?
I saw I saw 5 at one point, but I think there might have been 6. I think 1 of them might have been somewhere else.
Well, so I think if we stick with that, if we stick with those numbers, 2 protesters, 6 police officers.
There were also a bunch of journalists, and they can be
rowdy.
They can.
I think that's almost in line with the 6 literally unwashed members of the masses from Occupy Worcester, and the need for 9 police officers to keep an eye on them
when they were
last year in City Hall. So I mean,
they were going to a public meeting though.
This is true. The city councilor, the city council, and the manager were in extreme danger from people who hadn't eaten, slept, or showered in 2 weeks.
If people were going to a public meeting to complain about Peter Stefan, maybe we would want 9 police officers.
You might want
but this is just standing on the street.
But I mean, if we're going to assume that that's the level of law enforcement necessary for a limited number of people, I think we're dealing with the same, a similar ratio. So maybe things aren't too out of control just yet here.
We do have. I guess on the one hand, I do feel like there's people who are at least making. I don't know if people were making threats or not. I don't know. I saw online comments calling for people to steal the body out of the funeral home. So maybe you could have a fear that someone who is out there protesting would secretly be trying to rob this funeral home, grave rob this funeral home, or whatever.
It could also be that, when a political convention comes to town, it's usually assumed that you'll have a large number of sex workers, like prostitutes, come into town to meet the needs of those convention goers. Maybe because so many of these protesters were from out of town, we thought that there might be an influx of streetwalkers in the community, so we were just upping the police presence to deal with what would be a perceived increase in quality of life type crimes down there.
I'm trying to think if there's any other good theories here. Like, one thing we should point out for people who aren't from Worcester is there's protests of a reasonable size in Worcester all the time, sometimes with police presence, usually not. I feel like 95% of the protests I've been to in the city of Worcester, maybe more than that, had no police presence. They would last for an hour or 2. They would never,
Are they applauding for us?
We have an audience behind us, but our audience is not for us.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I would also think there's an argument to be made as well that almost the entirety of Worcester is kind of in a constant state of protest as well, but most of them are doing it from the comfort of their own homes.
They're doing it on Facebook.
They're doing it on Facebook, they're on Twitter, they're just sitting at home watching TV, and every once in a while I just think, what am I doing here?
They're sharing petitions with their friends.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about slot casino stuff?
Sure.
It's been a couple weeks since we talked about it. I don't know.
What's changed?
I don't know. I guess maybe we're going to set a date for when this thing's going to happen.
17th of September, I read.
17th of September. Seems like, again, I don't know. I keep making comments about what I think political people think about this, and then they go around and change their mind, and I totally get whiplash. It seems like the city manager has at least made some comments that he's not super excited about.
Sounds like the police department is not super thrilled about it. They had a report that I don't believe made its way to the council yet, but it seems like journalists got a hold of that was critical of the design and potential impacts on the neighborhood, which, you know, I mean, whether I disagree with them or not, I mean, that tends to be a body that the city relies upon, the council, the manager rely upon heavily in past practice to pick a direction in which they're going to head. So, I mean, that could be a bellwether of sorts for where the officials in the city, how they start viewing the project.
There was a public meeting where the slot machine, people were pointing out it's not really, slots parlor is probably the right term for this rather than casino, because there's nothing like a casino.
Not the movie, anyways.
Not like the movie. No, I don't really like the movie. That they put out one of those like architectural drawings. I don't know what you call them. The drawings look like they were done in colored pencil of like the possible architectural rendering of what the facility will look like. And I'm used to seeing these and then seeing a few years later the building be built. I feel like over the years he's sort of developed this ability to be like, okay, it's not going to be this cool. This person with the popsicle probably won't be standing there. Yeah. This beautiful eagle, soaring eagle with the American flag in its talons probably won't be there.
I think one of the better examples of what you're describing was when we saw the artist renderings of the original City Square designs. It involved lots of street vendors selling food. Yeah. And then we immediately banned their presence before that artist's concept of what was possible could even begin to come to fruition.
Absolutely right, exactly. That's a perfect example. This is a kind of a terrible looking architectural rendering. Like it just looks like a weird Walmart hanger right by the side of the room. Yeah. Like it's not set. No real nice setback. No.
And whether you like the way Kelly Square looks now or you hate it, the neighborhood has a feel, right? I mean, it's a very old neighborhood. The architecture has a certain feel to it. Right. A lot of the buildings that are being rehabbed along Water Green and Harding Streets have a very distinct sort of post-industrial vibe to them. Now that they're being rehabbed, and I don't think that giant building fits any of those. I mean, to your point, I mean, that rarely do things end up looking exactly like the original set of watercolors proclaim the goals to be. But that said, I don't know, maybe it's probably something that could be fleshed out a little bit more. To fit that neighborhood a little bit better.
It just looks cheap and crappy. It makes me feel like the people who are saying that, like, when people say, like, slot machines are going to degrade Worcester, my first reaction is like, how could you tell? But then I look at that building and I'm like, okay, now I kind of get what people are saying. That like, this is kind of trashy, even for a city which is sort of architecturally a mess. Mm-hmm. This is kind of just trashy looking. And this just bespeaks to like a really low budget, crappy project. And so I feel like much more biased against this project based on this drawing. This is people have their weird gut feelings. Some people are like, gambling is wrong, I'm going to be against this. This is wrong, that's wrong, I'm going to be against this. My feeling is like, I want to see whether or not your art is good. I want to see the JPEG and then I'll make up on it.
And I'm going to assume that Neil Bloom from Rush Street Gaming does not tune into 508 on a regular basis, but if anyone who works with Neil Bloom from Rush Street Gaming does pay attention to this show, keep that in mind, because Mike Benedetti was the person who, when we first started talking about this, was really angry that anyone would have this sort of knee-jerk reaction to being against the slots. Yeah, I think you went above and beyond to try and be at least accepting of the idea. Thank you. Be accepting of the idea that the slots parlor could work here, and it seems as though the company proposing the slots parlor has done the best job of convincing you that you don't want them here.
They've done such a bad job. I hear these stories about them paying local people so much money and putting so much money into this or that around this issue. I feel like they've just done such a bad job. Everything I've seen from them has been terrible and incompetent.
I think as time has gone on, though, that I think people have kind of keyed into the idea that a lot of the money that's been spent, not all of it, but a lot of the money that's been spent has very much been hush money, directed at people who could have been very vocal opponents or proponents, but either way just didn't want them out in the public being another voice in the mix, and they're not there as a result.
Wow.
But the mortgages are paid for now.
Good job to them. Anyway,
good luck selling the house.
Good luck. Maybe they're going to bring the A-team in later in the process. I don't know.
End of August.
Let's watch some stuff at the dive bar. I feel like the longer we talk, the more likely that some horrible thing is going to happen that we're going to have to put into this week's show. Worcester, God bless you. Let's stay strong. Let's stay true to ourselves. Let's tune in for next week's 508. Michael Benedetti, Brendan Mellican.
Thanks for having me.
Bye, everybody. It's May the 2nd, 2013. We're here at the dive bar with these guys, these musicians, today is like a special day. It's the end of an era. Duncan, I want to ask you about this. You've been to all these music nights.
Yeah, I've been to all of them.
How many have there been?
This is 300. This is number 305 or 4.
In the dive bar Thursday
You
night.
choose.
Jeremy, how many of them have you been to, Jeremy?
Oh, I don't know. Lots.
Hundreds. Yeah.
Hundreds.
200,
Maybe 100.
300.
I don't know.
What has been the concept behind this? Why is this such a big deal that like there's like it's already like way packed and it's an hour before the show?
I don't know. I think that it appeals to people that are into music.
And it's been sort of a curated jam session. Is
yeah,
that right?
we never called it a jam session.
Sorry.
Basically, it's a unique band each week.
Okay.
Each week, different people are brought down.
Okay.
And they play together.
And it's been like pop music, rock music.
Whatever we can come up with. We've done every style that we could think of.
Like,
Hey, we've done a lot of Hindu music.
like what kind of music?
We've done rock, funk, jazz, soul, R&B, blues. You know, we haven't done metal. We haven't done
Bluegrass.
yeah, we've done some bluegrass.
Bluegrass.
I think we attempted Highway Star once. That was probably the closest.
It's basically the genre is defined by what musicians are available that week. So each week you start with whoever has some songs, and then you fill in the blanks. So if there's a singer, hey, that singer knows a ton of country songs. Okay, I know a guy that will be great on guitar. I know a guy that will be great on keys. I know a guy that will play, saxophone on that. And then you fill it out each week, and then you have a band. So each week's a different band, but it's not a jam in the sense that it's not just show up and play. It's each week. It's sort of you're trying to like create a one-night only band.
And now let me say, for somebody going out to shows, this has been a pretty unique musical scene here. Has this been, like for you guys as performers, is this unique or is this stuff happening more often than people know?
It's unique in the sense that I don't know that it's happening everywhere else in the immediate area. So
Okay.
it's unique that way. I mean, we're all getting together to avoid genres, really. I think we're just showing up to make music, and
Yeah, the fact that it's somewhat free form and you can do whatever you want and then it still ends up working. Usually that situation where it's a free-for-all, we can do whatever we want right now. It can get a little self-indulgent sometimes, but it always tends to work sometimes.
I don't know. I've been impressed at the different bands' abilities. Just if people shout out some out of left field songs, very frequently people are like, all right.
Well, musicians always have a back catalog of, kind of the weirder, more out of place songs than most people have, So somebody says, that W.C. Handy song. Sure, I know that one. Let's do that. Let's play it. Let's play it like we've never played it before.
I want to ask Duncan one more question about historical perspective. Hi, Brooks. How's it going? He's over here doing a lot of power schmoozing.
Hi, I'm shy.
You're also the best lit one tonight. That's also very special.
Drink
Doing
more.
a cable accent.
Drink more.
There you go.
What is
Very talkative now.
you
famous.
Well,
say hi to the people?
yeah.
How about I want to ask you about all the good things that have come out of this music night.
Sure.
Now that it's ending up.
Okay.
What comes to mind?
Well, first forefront in my mind would probably be this new band that we started, the Curtis Mayflower. A lot of the songs that we have come up with, started just as jams here, just kind of free form. Somebody knew a riff and Craig knew some lyrics that he had written. So it was pretty cool. So we got an album that we just finished recording. Hopefully get that released in a couple months.
Wonderful. Let me ask Duncan this question too.
Culture, the mayor of Wormtown. You're not the mayor.
Let it die.
This is Brian Goslow.
Hi, Brian. How's it going? Duncan, I want to ask you one last question here. We were just talking to Brooks about the Curtis Mayflower
Yeah.
coming out of tonight. What other things have come out of the Thursday night music night?
Well, Scott Ricciuti and Pistol Whipped.
Okay.
Scott was one of the very first people to come down here and do these with me. And we started, he had never done a sort of, not a cover gig, but a gig where he had to fill 3 hours of music because he was playing with Huck and Childhood. So he was coming down here on Thursdays, just drums and guitar, and then eventually I convinced him, like, let's add some bass, let's do some things, and we added Jeff Birch, who's a bassist and Pistol Whipped, as well as a bunch of other things. And it became a band very organically. So Pistol Whipped, Beg, Scream, and Shout, which is a big soul band, was directly as a result of a couple years ago we were having a Christmas party here on a Thursday, and I wanted to do nothing but Motown, Stax, soul music. And so I put together a band with Craig singing, and a brass section and organ, and it was a 12-piece band. And we loved it, so we started doing it more regularly. We called it Beg, Scream, and Shout. Oh boy.
No one's coming to
And then currently the Curtis Mayflower. I'm forgetting one. Big-Eyed Rabbit.
Did you
the best?
Did you meet your wife at this Thursday night or just at this bar?
I met my wife at a Thursday night at the dive bar.
And now she's here tonight.
She's here tonight. Yep. She is as pregnant as can be. And I think she's going to sing a song with us. It's going to be great.
Well, I'll tell you, this has been a good Thursday night music night.
I think so.
Sorry to see it ending, but I'm glad it's going out on an amazing note here.
Yes, let me just mention, because I was spacing, but Big-Eyed Rabbit with John Short and Jeff Birch. I mean, that's the other band that started this, and they were currently playing.
Fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mike. Great to see you.